What we don't understand really is why this happened and why it was on video in the first place. So let's bring in the man who knows the answer. William Bryan, along with his attorney, Kevin Gough. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
All right. Mr. Bryan, you are known as Roddy to friends, correct?
That's right.
And in the police report, the McMichaels referred to a Roddy. I'm assuming that was you, yes?
Okay. Hey, hold on, Chris. You've been a prosecutor, and you can imagine that this prosecutor that's been in this case 24 hours, she's going to start throwing stuff around her living room if you start doing her job for her, okay? Because as good as you are, she'd probably rather do it herself. Do you know what we could talk about without causing problems for anybody? And I know you're trying, but this man cannot be answering substantive questions about the case. And if you feel that we've misled you in some way, I'm sorry.
No. It's not about misleading. It's about just being clear for the audience. Okay. I always believe that the best opportunity the media can give you is the opportunity to tell the truth in a way that helps you. That's all I'm saying. I don't know why you would dispute the notion of the man's presence at the situation, but that's fine. Let me move on. And you, Counselor, should weigh in whenever you feel like it. So, Mr. Bryan, how did you come to be in the car videotaping that day?
We're not going there.
You don't want to talk about that either. All right, so let's do this. You are afraid of the facts of this case, Counselor. Why?
Sir, I'm not afraid of anything. And I'm certainly not, with all due respect,
sure.
I'm not afraid of you, but I respect you.
And I respect you.
You are a brilliant, very capable lawyer, and you are you are a very good prosecutor. And my client is a mechanic with a high school education, and if you've ever been to the high schools around here, that's not necessarily saying much, okay? And I don't mind if the Board of Education doesn't like it. You know, I'm not their friend either, okay? But you can't be asking him questions about the substance of the evidence, because like I said, there's a young lady that's been in this case less than 24 hours who's going to be throwing stuff around her living room, and I don't want her mad at me, and I don't want her mad at my client.
I understand.
On the other hand, if you want to ask him, about his experiences here, how he feels, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Let me ask him one question, then I want to get back to you, Mr. Gough, because you have a different latitude than he does.
Sure, sir.
And just for the record, I do not believe that a level of education is in any way commensurate with common sense or savvy or understanding everything that you need to know about this case just through life experience. I want you to know that. I don't care that he only went to high school. Plenty of people have done that and achieved great things, let alone know why the heck they were in a car videotaping something like this. But let's put it to the side. Mr. Bryan, what do you want the audience to know about your role, your feelings, and your sense of responsibility for this situation?
Is that a multiple question, Chris?
Mr. Gough, let him answer it. I'm sure he'll do a good job. You can always answer it. You can amend after. Mr. Bryan.
I would just like to say, first of all, I am very sorry to the family. I pray for them every night, as well as my own family.
All right. Mr. Gough, do you think that your client should be understood as part of the altercation that day?
No, sir. No, sir. Not at all.
Because
my client has done nothing wrong here. He's committed no crime, and this is a horrible tragedy. This young man has lost his life, and you've seen the video. On a scale of 1 to 10, that's just it's horrifying to watch. It's painful to watch, even for a former prosecutor like yourself. And I'm sure you've seen lots of grisly incidents. So this is a terrible matter. And some people are going to have to answer for what they did, but my client is not responsible for that. My client was unarmed. My client hasn't shot anybody. My client hasn't been in so much as a fist fight since he was in high school. And you can take a look at him. He's 5'6", 5'7". This is not a gentleman who's out there looking for a fight or looking for trouble.
I understand, but often,
of course,
as we both know, again, Mr. Gough, I'm not putting your guy on trial, okay? That's not my job. My job is, this doesn't make any damn sense, this situation. And somebody wound up dead. And as we both know, the smaller you get, the more likely you are to use a weapon to make any kind of a show of force. So I don't care about the size of the people involved. It's about the size of their heart and the size of their brain. What I want to know is this. When you say that your client should not be considered as part of the altercation, I'm assuming...
He is not considered part of the altercation, okay. Chris. He's a witness, and that's all. That's all he's ever been.
Okay, good. And I will take that answer as guidance until I hear any different from an investigative authority, which I have not. Now, the McMichaels seem to know him, but I want to give you a chance, counselor. The fact that the McMichaels know Roddy or that Roddy knows them, why is it wrong to suggest, therefore, he knew about their intentions that day?
There is no relationship whatsoever between Roddy and the McMichaels. And with all due respect, while I'm not at liberty to go into all the details, but I don't think it's any secret that the relationship between Roddy's fiance and the district attorney's office here, it's utterly absurd to think that she would ever have any dealings with these people. You just don't understand, Chris. I mean,
that's why I'm talking to you.
How bad it is down here.
Well,
okay?
First of all, I am not condemning. I'm not condemning an area. I don't understand why no arrest was made. I don't understand why someone who accused themselves from the case went out of their way to paint a false picture of the victim. But these are not questions for you to answer. But I don't want to impugn the character of a community or of the police force other than to state curiosity at their inaction. And that's why this interview was so important. If it weren't for your client's tape, I don't know that anything would have happened here. And is that something, let me go back to Mr.
I think you're right.
Hold on. Let me go back to Mr. Bryan on that. Mr. Bryan, I hope you understand that your decision to videotape this may be what makes all the difference in the administration of justice in this case. Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir. If there wasn't a tape, then we wouldn't know what happened.
And how do you feel about that?
I would. I hope that it, in the end, brings justice to the family and peace to the family.
Mr. Gough, audience is listening now.
Yes, sir.
What do you want them to understand about why your client was where he was if it is not true that it was done in coordination with the McMichaels?
Chris, I don't think it's any secret. My client lives in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
He's at his house, minding his own business, and I'm trying not to complicate anybody else's job. He's at his house, minding his own business, and things happen, and in a matter of minutes, his life has been changed forever. And this family, the Arbery's, their lives have been changed forever. You know, and it's sometimes difficult in these situations to see the bigger picture. Mother's Day was not pleasant for Roddy here. It wasn't pleasant for me either. It wasn't the Mother's Day I was hoping for. But at the same time, Roddy's going to have other Mother's Days. That is, if nobody takes a pot shot at him. But the Arbery's will never be able to spend another Mother's Day with their son. So, you know, for them, it's hard to imagine anything worse that could have happened.
I'll get back to the fact pattern before we end, but let me ask you a couple of side questions because of your your apparent perspective on this place. Why do you think somebody might take a pot shot at your client?
Because certain people out there, for reasons that are not clear, are deliberately putting all kinds of misinformation out there to the extent, and I can't speak for the GBI, but I'm sure that however well-intentioned, that is hindering and hampering and impeding their investigation.
Like what?
There's so much distraction. The people out there that are talking about my client being some kind of vigilante, they're conjuring up conspiracy theories that don't exist, saying that my client was armed. Everyone knows he wasn't armed. That's never been an issue from day one. And, you know, why people would continue to put things out like that, to suggest that somehow he's in cahoots with whatever's been going on up on the third floor at the courthouse with the DAs. Look, Greg McMichael worked for the DA's office for many years, and he was a Glenn County police officer before that. My client does not have quote-unquote strong ties to law enforcement. He doesn't have ties to law enforcement.
I got you.
And since he's been in this relationship with this young lady, I can assure you that whether he realized it or not, he had no friends up at the courthouse.
All right.
And all this conversation and these letters and this legal analysis, while his name may have come up in it, nobody up there, with all due respect, gives a darn whether he lives or dies. So the idea that we have anything to do with this delay in the prosecution of this case, we've done everything we could do.
Listen, I got you, and I have no interest in intrigue about local politics. But for those tuning in just right now, what is your reservation, again, for your client doing what he is eminently capable of doing, saying why he was where he was, why he videotaped as he did, and what he understands happened that day? Why do you not want him to say what can only help clear his name?
Because, Chris, in America, as I believe you're well aware, we try our cases in courts of law. And this thing where we've come to in this country over the years, where important cases are being tried in newspapers and on television and on blogs and stuff, that is not serving the interests of justice.
But he's not on trial. He's not going to be on trial, is he?
He doesn't control anything. He is a pawn in a much larger game. And he has no say-so in that.
But he is a witness, and we have witnesses on all the time, so the
have
American people can understand maybe that there is a miscarriage of justice, because the facts as they're being evinced from people who were on the ground, who saw and heard and experienced, give a different picture than what they're getting from authorities. They can be very helpful.
And when you feel that you are not being treated right, you should speak out. And if people won't listen to you, you need to speak out further. And that's exactly what happened in this case. This family wanted justice. And I'm not commenting on the McMichaels. That's not my place, okay? And they've got rights, and they're presumed innocent too. But they spoke out. They wanted justice. They weren't treated right. And they kept talking, and nobody was listening. And I know some of the people who were trying to help them, and nobody was listening.
Is your client one of them? Was he one of the people trying to help? Is your client one of the people who was trying to help the Arbery's?
He was helping that day. Yes, sir. But for him, there would be no video.
That's true. Let me ask you about the McMichaels really quickly. Based on your understanding of the community and the relationships involved, do you believe the McMichaels had some kind of connection to Ahmaud Arbery, at least in their own perspective of understanding?
Chris, honestly, I don't know. And there's been so much misinformation out there and gossip and speculation. I don't want to add to it.
Well, the police report. The police report.
I've heard so many crazy things.
But, Mr. Gough, let's forget about community hearsay. I don't care about Chatty Cathy's either. What I'm saying is, in the police report, the McMichaels made it very clear to the police in the moment where they were on the scene with the victim lying in his own pool of blood that they thought they knew this guy, that they had been on the lookout for this guy, that they identified him from past experience of seeing him and knowing him. I don't think that surprises you. Why? What do you think the McMichaels believed about Arbery?
My understanding, Chris, and I've been in this case for 72 hours, and I'm playing catch-up here, but my understanding was that this young man, as he lay there, with not so much as a blanket or a towel over his head, okay? But as he's there, nobody knows who he is. His family was not there, and I can only assume they were not there because they were not notified, and they were not notified because nobody knew. Now, I can't speak for the McMichaels and what's in their mind. All I'm hearing is that well after this incident took place, nobody could identify him. Now, why the McMichaels do or say what they do then or now, I can't speak to that. But if the police couldn't identify him, it may be that, I don't know. You're going to have to ask the McMichaels or their lawyer.
They have been given the opportunity.
But my understanding was, they're sitting in a jail cell, as far as I know, without counsel, which I'm sure for Greg McMichael is an experience he never thought he'd experience. But That's not why we're here.
All right. So,
but what I'm saying is, my understanding is the police couldn't figure out who he was for some time.
Right.
And they should have been treating that body with respect and that young man with respect even before they knew who his mother and father was.
Well,
now, I'm not saying
question
they
about
did,
that.
but from what I've heard, nobody knew who he was. They couldn't identify him.
No question about
Maybe
that. But
that's
I think
wrong.
There's a difference between his name and people thinking they knew him from earlier activities, because McMichael himself says in the police report, in the moment that the police get to the scene, that they knew who this guy was and that they remembered him from something else, and that's why they took off after him, and that they had information about him being involved in other crimes that we can't track down anywhere other than this video of him arguably trespassing on a construction site. So just to be clear as we end this interview, your statement, Mr. Gough, on behalf of William Bryan, also known as Roddy, is he wasn't working with the McMichaels, he wasn't called to the scene by the McMichaels, and he wasn't videoing in any way to help the McMichaels. Is that all true from your perspective?
He wasn't there for the McMichaels at all. I can say that, and he doesn't have any relationship with the McMichaels.
And the one sticking point that I've heard you try to explain before, but hasn't met satisfaction with me yet, is when you see something that you know is wrong, even though you're videotaping it in the moment, even though things happened before the videotaping that he didn't videotape, you call the police. I don't care about his education. Everybody knows that. You can be in high school. I've met many people, and so have you in high school, who will eat our lunch despite all our education intellectually. Why didn't he call 911?
Well, first of all, he can't use the phone for a phone call while
I know,
he's
but you can hang up and call 911. You can stop
you can.
videotaping and call 911.
Okay.
That's an easy answer.
Chris,
yes,
Chris, with all due respect,
please.
With all, feel free to give the answer for me, okay? If you're asking me my answer,
yes,
I can tell you that in the real world, things are much different. It's one thing to watch it on TV. It's another thing to do it in real life. And
calling 911?
He's not a young man, but...
What's the difference?
I hope we all know how to call 911.
But what I'm saying is, what point are you trying to make?
911.
Right now, I'm videotaping you. I think it's very important. I decide to stop because now I'm going to call 911. I call 911. What's so complicated, Mr. Gough?
Okay. If you'll go back and look at that video.
Yes, sir.
If my client had been 2 seconds later getting where he was, there wouldn't be any video, not one worth watching, not one anybody would care about. There'd be nothing to see other than a young man bleeding out on the street.
I agree.
In the middle of the day.
I agree.
I think if you go back and you look at the circumstances, putting aside the logistical issues about making telephone calls while you're using your phone, I think if you go back and look at the circumstances, there was no question the police were on their way. I think as I understand it, the sirens were audible almost immediately.
Okay.
And they were on the scene for what felt like seconds, but couldn't have been more than a minute. Now, you've got better access to information than I do, and maybe I misunderstand that, but I'll be honest with you, under the circumstances, I don't think that anybody would have thought there was any question as to the police were coming.
All right. Kevin Gough.
And frankly, if the police had gotten there a few seconds earlier, a minute earlier, this man still might be alive today.
Right, maybe. Depends on how extreme the wounds were. It happened all very quickly. I'm not in the blame phase. Nobody should be. Mr. Gough, I appreciate you taking this opportunity. And Mr. Bryan, I appreciate you taking it as well. I understand why you're afraid of getting caught up in the case and making people upset and in the prosecution. I get it all. But I do want you to know this. I don't agree with your counselor about one thing. Mechanics, my brother's a mechanic. I was raised by mechanics. I'm sure that you are more than competent. I don't care about your education. You know what you did that day. You know why you did it. And you know how you feel about it. That has nothing to do with education. I want you to know that opportunity will always remain open to you here and counsel for you as well. I'm not going to limit your capability to help people and convey information just because of what degree you have on your wall. I just want you to know that, Mr. Bryan. I respect you, and I appreciate you being here. Counselor, you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Get the part you need.